Welcome to Saddle Up and Sound Off,
our weekly variety podcast inviting our listeners to challenge beliefs and find inspiration in thought-provoking conversations and stories. And we're your hosts, Suzanne and Dwight.
Over the next few episodes, we'll be talking with Ian Steyn, who, with his wife, Sally, have lived an extraordinary life, starting with his upbringing in South Africa to the inspiration he is today. Ian and Sally are not only an inspiration, but they're also my parents. Ian was born and raised in South Africa in 1945. With his 7 brothers and sisters, they lived primarily in Zululand and Pretoria. He attended the prestigious public boarding high school, Pretoria Boys High, which produced recognizable public figures such as Elon Musk, constitutional judge Edwin Cameron, and author Damien Galgut. After graduating, Ian traveled to the United States of America via cargo ship and became a major influence in the auto industry, eventually transferring his influence to the outdoor hospitality industry. He gained significant recognition for his vision and leadership, earning the Jim Webb Spirit Award and Entrepreneur of the Year Award, among many others. Alongside his wife Sally, they gained significant recognition for their innovative transformation with the Jellystone Park in Larkspur, Colorado. Dad, tell me a little bit about from your beginnings in South Africa, growing up there, and the things that really impressed upon you in those early years.
Yeah, thank you, Dwight, and I'm so glad we're doing this, by the way. I wished I had done this with Hoopa and Gran.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been nice. So, and by the way, thank you for your introduction. It's mostly based on fact, but I'm glad you listened to me when I used to tell my stories. Unless your friends think less of me for lying down for the interview, maybe I should start with why I'm not getting up.
Sure.
So, having had an awesome life filled with gratitude, lots and lots of highs, lots and lots of the lowest lows one can imagine, and everything in between. Very, very grateful for everything. And I've had plenty of warning for this 11 years ago, starting with a heart attack and subsequent complications. But thanks be to God and so many others who have had such an influence on my life so far have outlived all the expectations. But right now, I have been transferred by Mayo Clinic in Phoenix and in Scottsdale to their heart failure clinic a few months ago, which is the end stage of heart failure. Excuse me. And typically at that point, they say about 6 months expectancy. But like I said, having said that, I have so much to be thankful for and have always been able to outlive the expectations. I have a few other, 3 other conditions which are not healthy. And that's pulmonary fibrosis, which was diagnosed a few years ago, which is also a terminal disease, along with prostate cancer and with Sjogren's disease, which is a degenerative disease. So in any event, I'm saying all that to say the reason I'm lying down is because I can't get up. but I but I have so much for which um, to give thanks, and so many people and so many joy-filled memories, and um, and that's what keeps me going. And you started with the outdoor hospitality industry and the Jellystone resorts, which actually was started after your mother and I thought we had retired and happened to buy a piece of land that happened to have an old KOA on it.
I
And
remember it well.
and one thing led to another. And we realized that that was an industry that was very exciting and very much reminded me of when we started buying new car dealerships in the 1970s, and industry dominated by wonderful people, but sort of mom and pop type operations. And I don't mean that disparagingly. They were wonderful people, but the businesses were not very sophisticated in any event. It reminded us of that, and seeing all the families come together, and the parents and the grandparents and the grandkids sitting around fires, eating together, playing together, talking together.
And maybe I'm wrong, but when you were growing up in South Africa, some of the experiences that you had in South Africa, including the safaris that you'd take
Yeah,
and those connections. So tell me
yeah,
about
yeah,
those days.
yeah. Thank you, Lois. So I digress. My ADD kicks in.
That's we both have it.
That's right. So, so yeah, right. So growing up in South Africa, I now realize, and like I think many of us, when we're growing up, or whatever shoes we're walking in or moccasins we're walking in, we think they're very normal, and don't realize how exceptional and unique everyone's experiences are. And certainly mine was growing up in South Africa during the colonial times, when South Africa was still part of the British Commonwealth and we were the Union of South Africa. And it was just very special, very, very different, of course. And as you alluded to, my growing up in part of it in Zululand, and in boarding school in Ishawi there as a very small boy. Um, very, very different, but extremely privileged and very fortunate in retrospect. And so, while of course it was very rural, sugarcane country and pineapple country, my friends were the Zulus, and I grew up playing with our servants' kids, and of course your house servants. Many of them would live on the property because we were literally right on the border of Zululand itself. Many of our workers came from, we would go in with tractors and trailers and pick them up in Zululand at their huts and bring them in for their work daily on the sugarcane plantations and picking pineapples. And so growing up that way was very definite. Yes, I mean, we would have, of course, lots and lots of monkeys in that part of the world, and invariably you'd be walking down at the river and find a baby monkey where something had happened to the mother and had been abandoned, and we'd bring it up and raise it. And we had some some awesome pets, Umpy and Kiss, two of my favorite monkeys and great memories. And I think I was told you the story. We actually had a pet giraffe called Shorty. My family had amongst others, a construction companies, mostly earth-moving company, and we would build roads and dams. And one of the contracts we had was building dams in a game reserve. I think it was Louis that was just getting started in Zululand. And so we were building these basically water holes for all the wildlife. And there was a rogue baby giraffe who they just could not get control of. So my brother Doe decided that we should probably have it and raise it. So anyway, they come home with Shorty in the back of a pickup with we had a cage built around his neck because he couldn't stand there just like that and hold his neck up on his own. So we had a cage built with a seat on top of the cage, and there was a Zulu sitting in the top of the cage with his arms around Shorty's neck to hold him up to get him back to the farm. But anyway, Shorty turned out to be quite a character and caused quite a lot of ruckus and trouble on the farm. And we eventually, when he was grown up, actually gave him back to the game reserve. But yeah, so lots of rare opportunities. And speaking about that and growing up in the bush and, after, excuse me, after high school, I'd done an aptitude test when I was matriculating, like we all did, to try to help you decide what to do for a career and where you would find the most joyful times. And my aptitude, said I needed to be in science and outdoors. And so we decided veterinary medicine. And as you know, one of Opa's degrees was in veterinary medicine, which he'd actually gone to Vienna in Austria right after the First World War, and studied there. His father, my Opa, had sent him and his brother, Henny there, excuse me. And so one of the great joys, talking about what you mentioned, the safaris and the outdoors, was as a veterinary student in the holidays, working for mining companies, and these mining companies, iron ore mining companies, would have huge, big farms around the areas where the mines were, which were typically, of course, remote, and so they needed to be self-sustaining, and so they would basically, raise everything for all the mine workers for the town, raise all their own produce and meat and so on. And in this case, at Tabazimbi, they were also starting a private game reserve there and needed to stock that game reserve. So we would go as veterinary students for the holidays, go up there and catch wildlife and bring them back to Tabazimbi, to the game reserve that we were just starting. And I mean, we were catching everything right from giraffe and using all different methods, of course, from giraffes to rhinos to waterbuck to eland to, you name it. And we were catching it and bringing it back there and just had some awesome experiences with that. And also growing up, fortunate enough to have grown up with a very dear friend, Louis Knobel, who's now no longer with us, whose father was the director of the film board in South Africa and was commissioned to do documentaries in those years. So I'm now talking in the 1950s and 60s, to do documentaries on the Bushmen, to document the last surviving nomadic people that at least we knew of. And so we would go into Botswana, into the Kalahari Desert, what was then called Botswana land. And we would go into the Kalahari Desert, which is in part where Louis's father, Wim Louis, was raised. His fathers, in turn, were missionaries there in the 1800s.
Wow.
And anyway.
And these were the Bushmen, if I'm.
These were the Bushmen, correct.
Yeah.
Kalahari Bushmen. And so we would go in there with a convoy of Land Rovers and find these bushmen, and very often people who had, of course, never seen a white skin, let alone a round wheel or a motor car or containers. You know, they would use ostrich egg shells, and I think you've seen some of those shells that I still have.
Yes, yeah.
They would use ostrich eggs for shell, and they would trade you the world for a glass container or for a tin container. So it was an awesome experience, literally being exposed in a matter of 2, 3 days travel, because of course the travel was very slow then. And particularly once you got into the desert, it was very slow progress. So to take you, even though it wasn't even 500 miles really from Pretoria, but it just took a long time to get there. Anyway, within 2 or 3 days, you would go from literally being in a city like any metropolis you know to being in Stone Age times where these people rubbed sticks together to make fire, were totally nomadic. Of course, no crops, so everything was hunting, gathering berries, or gathering the different bulbs and leaves and stuff that they ate. So
Hmm.
that was an incredible time, and something at the time you never thought anything of, but very, very fortunate to have been raised in those times.
And was it this? Were all these events were after your aptitude test?
So no, my aptitude test was when I was in matric, so my last
Right.
year in high school.
Okay.
So
All that was before that, but
before that, of course, the university that when I was at vet school was after the aptitude tests that they had given me. Little did they know I had ADD and I didn't like tests and I never could pass any tests and consequently never finished college.
there I were that's a very large group, I believe.
Yeah.
So going to Pretoria Boys High, you essentially, I mean, it was a boarding school, so you essentially lost kind of that family relationship for a term.
So, Boys High, yes, was a boarding school, but also had what they call day dogs. And day dogs were the kids of people who lived locally, who actually by that time, um, I was living in Pretoria. And so I was actually a day dog at Boys High. Um, and I'm trying to remember by number, but I would say day dogs were probably in the minority. Uh, and I was also sort of the black sheep of Boys Eye. Boys Eye was comprised of really, really smart people and really, really smart teachers. And in those days, of course, corporal punishment was very alive and well, and I very much needed corporal punishment to keep me in line. And I remember so well, so many of these awesome teachers who had such an incredible influence on my life, Dwight,
Yeah.
who never ever realized how much they had influenced my life. And and later on, I think did you come with us to South Africa when we went for my 40th high school reunion? I don't remember if you just came anyway. Your mom says you didn't come with us.
Yeah, I don't believe I did.
Anyway, we went back for that, and I was so excited because I wanted to go to some of these old teachers who were so brutal, but that I needed and who shaped me so much. And I wanted to thank them, and they weren't there. So I never got to let them know how much they had influenced me and how thankful I was, notwithstanding Eddie Dory's favorite punishment. Oh my goodness, I can feel it. He would come and he'd put his hand on your shoulder and he would take your earlobe and start yanking and yank it and yank it. And oftentimes he would yank it so long and so hard that the skin would split here between your lobe and your face. But he did it, well, because I needed it. and and I appreciated it. And I wanted to tell him and so many of the other teachers there. And I never got to do it. And that's why I now go so out of my way to let people know how much I appreciate them and what they've done. I wasn't going to get emotional, but to say thank you for the smallest things and to say please and to just let people know how much they're appreciated and what they means so much. From going to breakfast in a cafe and the people being there to cook it and serve it and letting the wait person know. And I like to say it. I say, thanks for getting up and coming and serving me breakfast, just so they know it's really appreciated. And your mother and I go out of it, our way to let each other know, and from the smallest things. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Don't take anything for granted. I took all that stuff for granted for the bulk of my life.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do, and I think it's important what you're saying to realize and make an effort to thank people.
Yeah, absolutely, Dwight. And talking about being thankful, so thankful for my faith and all the people who influenced me.
That's all for today. Thanks for saddling up with us.
To catch next week's Sound Off with Suzanne and Dwight, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can also contact us via email at saddleupandsoundoff@gmail.com.